I'm sitting in a rental car in a parking lot outside of Tim Hortons, deciding whether or not I should go in. It's a cold November day in Ontario, so everything, including the people, looks gray. I don't do Tim Hortons. I've lived on the evergreen West Coast for 7 years, and I drink my coffee in proper Italian coffee shops on Commercial Drive, surrounded by colorful people. I'm here because, somewhat out of character, I let him decide where we would meet. I mean, he does live here, and I don't. Why did I think this would ever be a good idea? He's 20 years older than me, and he gets his coffee at Tim Hortons. Probably the drive-thru on a normal day. I know his ex. She doesn't speak well of him. I sit in the car feeling annoyed. I'm already disappointed, and the desire to drive away is really strong. But I'm curious, and I can handle this. So I'm doing that thing we do before a first meetup, nervously looking at his photograph because I'm not sure that I will recognize him. And it's going to be very awkward going from table to table asking every man, "Are you my father?" I get out of the car, but I'm not moving. I'm just leaning on the car while I stare across the parking lot at the entrance that seems so far away. My heart is racing, my palms are sweating, my feet are stuck to the pavement. There's a man in there whose face I should know. This should be easy. His hug should be familiar and safe. But he's the opposite of that because we have no stories. We have no stories because, according to my mother, he walked out on us when I was 18 months old to go back to his high school sweetheart, and if I saw him after that, I have no memory of it. And I'm fine. I've handled my entire life without that. So at age 33, I don't really want to share an awkward hug and a stiff conversation with the black hole that was supposed to be my father. I don't even have those fake memories that we create from looking at photos and then we tell ourselves that we have memories because there were no pictures of him when I was growing up. And now I'm just stalling and shivering because I can't decide if I'm going in. I start to recall a few black and white photos that I cherished, that my mom kept from our life, me and my mom's life way back then. And in the first, I see her, she has a huge, big, round belly, and I'm inside, and she has a big, goofy smile on her face. And in the next, I'm a tiny, bald infant, cradled in her arms, and we are both sound asleep. Maybe 6 months later, in the last one, is a shot of us on the edge of a fountain in a park on a beautiful summer day, looking straight into the camera with matching, goofy smiles on our faces. And as a little girl, I would look at those pictures over and over, studying every detail, searching them for clues of a father that wasn't there. And then I realized it. For the first time, he was there. How can I not have realized that before? He was there. He's the one that took the photos. He's the one that watched us sleeping. He's the one that went to the park and took the camera and told us to sit there. He's the one we're smiling at. This realization starts me moving toward the door. I'm floating across the parking lot as though in a dream, my heart still pounding in my ears so loudly I can hear nothing else. I recognize him immediately because I look more like him than the 3 children he raised. He stands up so I can just walk into his arms for a big hug. We sit down and I start to drink the coffee he's already ordered for me, thankful that I just have something to do. For a long time, all I can do is stare, so he does all the talking. He's a big talker, and he just tells story after story about nothing in particular, as we both get over the shock of just being together. Within a week of the meeting, We would get around to tougher conversations about his side of the story of losing his wife and child, but for today we keep it light. Anecdotes and updates that won't bring emotion to the surface. When the coffee is gone, he pulls a black and white photo out of his wallet and slides it across the table, saying, "This is for you, kid." It has a white line down the middle of it. It's pretty beat up, he says. "This is a copy, and that white line is a crease mark. I had to fold it to get it into my wallet, and it's been there for 30 years. I'm holding the first picture of us I've ever seen. I am about 1 year old, perched on his knee, looking relaxed and happy, wearing a cute sundress. He's wearing a dirty work shirt. I am looking at the camera, but he is looking at me, and he has a big, goofy smile on his face." Thank you.
In September 2016, 2 lawyers from the UK were looking out over Kampala, the capital of Uganda, from the roof of a Hilton hotel when they heard gunshots coming from below. Terrorists were storming the building. They took over 100 hostages, killing several of them, before Ugandan commandos finally recaptured the hotel. But by then, those lawyers were long gone. Their law firm was a client of the emergency response firm Northcott Global Solutions. When the shooting started, the pair phoned the Northcott Operations Center in London, who immediately sent their local personnel to pluck the men from the roof of the hotel by helicopter in under an hour. Exciting stuff. It's like a Jack Reacher novel. I first heard of Northcott a few years ago when I read about them in a magazine. I was amazed reading of their bravery and daring do. It seemed like their staff comprised of tough ex-Special Forces officers who kept their well-funded clients safe in danger zones all over the world. Little did I know that one day I would call them myself. This past August, my husband John departed for Bolivia, where he was planning to take the Ruta del Che, a 3-day trek retracing the last journey of Che Guevara in the days leading up to his capture and execution by the Bolivian army in 1967. This route through rural Bolivia is poorly served by transport options. "I might need to walk part of the way," said John, "or maybe I'll hitchhike. And the cell service might be a little patchy here and there." Now in 1987, when John as a teenager went to Latin America for the first time, his parents could only wait anxiously for infrequent letters and calls from a payphone. But this is 2019, and I expect at least daily communication. Patchy cell service, to me, means the odd dropped call or maybe a few hours out of contact. And to my credit, I didn't start to worry until 36 hours had passed with no word whatsoever from John. Now, we've all heard stories about murdered tourists, and that's where my mind inevitably went as the time ticked by. I'm in a WhatsApp group with John's family, and while I didn't want to panic them, at this point I mentioned that I was starting to worry a little bit. I expected to be reassured. However, they immediately chimed in their agreement. "Call the consulate," said his mother. "Call the foreign office," said his sister. "Call Interpol," said his brother. So his brother Tim and I did all these things. We started making calls. The police, the British Foreign Office. I spoke to the British Vice Consul in La Paz, whose name is Jill. We're still pals. We called Interpol. I checked his bank accounts for any activity. And no word. The third day, with no contact, dawned. I booked off work, as I could think of nothing but this. I imagined all the worst things that could be happening, and then I doubled them. After all, John wouldn't be the first ever dark-haired, unshaven, left-wing, troublemaking foreigner to run into a snag on the Ruta del Che. Finally, Tim said, "Okay, that's enough. Enough messing about. We're calling Northcott." Northcott? Well, that rings a bell. Turns out, Tim had been to school with a fellow called Jerry, previously a commando with the British Army, and now a security operations manager at Northcott Global Solutions. Jerry, when reached, asked for John's route, photos, blood type, list of identifying features. He told us his man in the region was currently on a helicopter rescue mission in Guatemala, but would be assigned to us as soon as that was done. Well, this was getting exciting, but before long, Jerry said, at some point, guys, we're gonna have to press the cost button. This little exercise would be more than £1,000 a day. That's around 1,700 Canadian. Was I ready to press the cost button? I really like John. He's quite a good guy, and he's pretty helpful sometimes. He knows how to use the printer, and he's a dedicated parent. But was I ready to press the cost button? If I knew that doing so would save John from violence, then absolutely. But I don't want to chuck $1,700 a day at burly soldiers without a damn good reason. We decided to give it until that evening before deciding. And then, at 12:32 p.m., the long-awaited text arrived. I'm alive! I'm arriving in Valle Grande in the back of a pickup driven by Italians. Of course he was. What a relief. Although, I fear John thinks I overreacted. In the days that followed, he was in constant contact, mostly making a point, I think. I am heading to a restaurant, I'm looking at a menu, I'm asking the waiter a question. Now it's time for coffee, and to this day, if I'm more than 30 minutes late replying to a text from John, he tells me he's going to call them Mounties. And yes, I was quite happy to get John back from the Bolivian countryside without having to charter a helicopter, and for a grand total of $0, he returned safe and sound. And while in the end this didn't turn out to be a Jack Reacher adventure, thank goodness, we did get a couple of good stories out of it.
How are you all doing? So I'll take you back to the final year of 2003. I was about 10 years old, and I grew up in kind of a rural area in Ireland. I grew up with like a big forest around me and a bog and everything, and in my local area there was only about 6 houses and this old seaweed factory. We didn't really know much about the seaweed factory when I was a kid. It was more so just we knew it was associated with my granddad, and we didn't know why it was associated with my granddad. So yeah, me and my cousin used to hang out quite a lot, and I was an imaginative kid. However, I was also an idiot, and that's actually quite a dangerous word. But anyway, so we were playing in the woods as we did. We used to play like knights and stuff and fantasy things and all that kind of stuff. And there was one day we were kind of playing on the ridge, and it kind of looked down on the seaweed factory, and this Jeep drove up, this black Jeep. These 2 guys got out, and they were kind of looking around, and me and my cousin were like, "Oh, what's going on? No one ever goes by the seaweed factory. It's it's derelict building, nothing's there." So we kind of like watched them for a while, and they went out, and drove away. And as a normal person would assume, we immediately assumed that they were terrorists and that they were taking over the seaweed factory to plot to take over Ireland. So, okay, and as you do. So that was fine. So we developed a plan that we would go down to the seaweed factory for a couple of days, scope it out. So, like the first time, we just kind of like looked around, see if the Jeep came back. It didn't, of course it didn't. But there was some dodgy stuff going about. It was an old seaweed factory. No one had been there for a while. And yeah, then we kind of like buck up our ideas. You go near one of the doors and like try the handle, and then run away into the woods again. And obviously it was locked. So we got very brave then. And one day we went down, and we were kind of looking around the place, and we found these 2 metal poles. And we're like, okay, we'll break one window, go in, and just kind of check it out, see what's there. It's probably nothing, right? So we did. We broke one window. Turns out that room that we broke into was the shed, and it had no entrance to the actual factory itself. So we wrote off that day. We're like, all right, okay, we'll leave it a week. We'll see if anyone says anything, and then we'll go back. So no one said anything, of course, because it's a derelict building and no one goes there. And we went down, we got the same metal poles, And we broke another window, this time a double glazed window. It was a little bit more effort, but we got there, we got through it. And we got into this office, and there were like photographs of like random people and all these like documents, these like invoices. My cousin Jason stole a radio. I told him not to. He did every day. I feel like he was also 2 years older than me. He really should have known better, to be honest. But anyway, so that was fine. We stole all these photographs and evidence, what we called it, and we brought it up to a little base that we had in the woods, and we actually had the keys as well for the shed. It was the shed, but not for the actual building itself. There was another day we went down. We were looking through all the evidence, and we were in the building, and Jason my cousin really needed to go to the bathroom, and the office that we broke into, all the doors in the building were locked, so we just had access to that office. Otherwise, we had to break another window, and we weren't going down that road. We'd already broken enough windows. And yeah, he needed to do number 2, unfortunately. And he said, "It's fine. I'll go by the woods and I'll use some leaves." I'm like, "Alright, fine." However, I don't know if you know rhododendrons. They're not. If everyone's gone for a doo-doo in the woods, it's not the plant you want to use. Alright? Not much grippage, low surface area. Anyway, so anyway, he was like, "Here, look in the office for like some tissue," and I was like, "Okay." Couldn't find any tissue. But you know that printing paper that you print pictures on? That like glossy paper? That was the only, apart from the papers we stole actually, that was the only paper in the place. So I gave him them and he had to go with that, and that was fine. Looking back now, if the whole time we were trying to be, inconspicuous, we were trying to be like, really clever. He literally left a deuce right outside the place, so that's DNA right there. But anyway, so had all these things. We kind of got bored of it, and nothing happened after it, and we still had the base, but we never went there anymore. And 3 weeks later, we were down in my grandparents' house, and we were having dinner. A lot of my family, most of his family, and I was kind of sitting across from Jason, eating my dinner or whatever, and my grandfather's at the head of the table, and he goes, "Did you hear that someone broke into the seaweed factory?" And my dad and my uncle were like, "Oh, really? Oh, that's weird." And they were kind of chatting away. I'm like, yeah, it was weird. They like broke 2 windows. They didn't steal anything. Really, really strange. I was like, "Oh, okay." And Jason, I still remember the look on his face. This is a guy I once shot an arrow at, and even now he looked more scared. I think he took my scooter. It was a whole thing. He looked more scared than I'd ever seen him scared in his entire life. And I kind of just looked at him and went down and just kept eating my dinner. The next day, it was DEFCON 5. We ran, I still remember, 8 in the morning, I said to my mom, "Yeah, I'm going out to play." Ran to our base, we burnt all the photos and burnt all the papers that we stole. Jason still kept the radio, which, I told him not to, but he did anyway. And we threw the keys into the woods. So that was fine. I always said that I would never talk about it. We both agreed we're never going to talk to anyone about it. Because it turns out the actual seaweed factory was owned by my family. And the 2 people that we saw was more than likely my granduncle and his son checking out the place, just because they checked it every month or so just to make sure everything was okay. So about 2 years ago, I went home briefly and I said to my dad, "Hey, remember when someone broke into the seaweed factory and, nothing was ever done about it and no one knew what the hell happened?" He was like, "Yeah." And he was kind of like expressionless. He didn't really. He was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Oh yeah, that was actually me and Jason. Like, I'm really sorry." He's like, "Yeah, of course it fucking was. Look at the place where we live. Who else would have done that? Broke 2 windows and not stolen anything? You're both idiots." And yeah, that was my childhood.
So I grew up Mormon, but not just Mormon, like Utah Mormon. So I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah, and there's different rules for Utah Mormons than regular Mormons. One of the major ones is that you get married by 19, 20 if you're really pushing it, 18 if you're really lucky. So when I was 17, I was dating this boy, Connor. And Connor was really sweet. He wrote me a lot of really terrible poetry that I didn't like very much. He told me he loved me after the second date in front of his parents. He had lovely red hair, and he asked me to prom, which was like the best thing that a boy could do. So when I applied to schools, I applied to mostly Utah, some outside of Utah, and a few in Canada, which was out there because I was getting married by the time that I was 19. So when I was 17, Connor took me on a hike the second day after I got into UBC, and I had accepted my offer, and I hadn't quite told him yet. At the top of the hike, we were at this beautiful, amazing peak overlooking the entire valley, and I set down my water bottle, and I turned around, and he is on one knee with a ring, and he is singing a song that I had never heard before that he had written. I don't remember a single word of that song, but I do remember everyone at that peak. It was very crowded. It was a beautiful sunny day. Turning around and looking at me, and silence spreading. And he ended his song, and he looked at me, and there was silence. And he said, "Will you marry me?" And there was silence. And everyone started chanting, "Kiss him." And so I kissed him and grabbed his hand and went back down the mountain. And in my head, I knew that I had to marry him, and I honestly considered it out of just sheer awkwardness. So I was like, "I have something to tell you," and he was like, "Okay." And I was like, "I'm moving to Canada," and he was like, "Okay, we can get married in Canada, that's fine." And I said, I don't want you to come to Canada." And he said, "Do you still want to get married?" And I said, I don't think so. And that was the most awkward 2 hours of my life. Walking back down that mountain, we got in his car, and he said, "Do you want to go to Outback Steakhouse?" And I said, "I don't think so." And he said, "Do you still want to get married?" And I said, "I don't think so." He told me that I could keep the ring. I said I didn't want to. He said he would put it in my mailbox if I didn't want to, and then recited a poem that he had written to me when we first met. We met at Pioneer Reenactment Camp, which is a Mormon thing that you do when you're 16. We met pulling a hand cart 10 miles when I was wearing tennis shoes and a Pioneer Mormon dress. And I honestly thought that I was madly in love with him, and he told me that he liked me because I wasn't like other girls, because I didn't want to hold his hand while we were pulling the hand cart. So we got back down the mountain. He dropped me off back at my house. I tried to give him the ring back one more time, and he said no. And eventually I gave up and just moved to Canada and hoped that everything was okay. By the time I was 18, I realized how terrible that really was, and I tried to message him, and he sent me a poem back, and I figured that was as good of a breakup as I was going to get, and just moved on. Later on, I realized that being honest is important, and I feel like I've learned that since. I've since learned the amazing parts about dating in your 20s and drinking and leaving Mormonism. I still think about Connor sometimes. I stalked him on Facebook a few weeks ago. I found out that he got a degree in creative writing. I hope he's met his love of his life. He isn't married yet. I've gotten very, very good at dodging questions about why I am not married yet. But I'm not looking to do it anytime soon. I still have the ring. It's in the back of my closet. I don't quite know what to do with it. But at the end of the day, I called my dad about this a few weeks ago, and I asked him, "Did you know that my high school boyfriend proposed to me?" And he said, "Yeah, he asked me if that was okay." And I said, "Why the fuck didn't you tell me that he was going to propose?" Moral of the story is, I learned not to trust men, not because they're untrustworthy, but because the men in my life have either proposed to me by the age of 17 or didn't tell me that someone was going to propose to me at the age of 17. If anyone has any idea of what to do with the ring, requests are very, very appreciated. Thank you.